Now, have you ever thought it strange that Tarzan, the legendary ape man who was supposedly brought up in an African jungle, that he doesn't have any African mates? Now, that's the kind of question that's being considered by Barbara and her colleague Amaka Ugwunkwo in their new podcast. It's called Hollywood Africans. It's a fascinating idea, Barbara. What gave you the idea to start a podcast that deals with the way Africans and Black people are portrayed by Hollywood?
Good question. I think there's lots of times I've watched films, and the background people, or if they're set in Africa, but the main characters are all European or Indian or anything else but Africans. And also, most of the African characters just have no voice or are portrayed as very cowardly or just not very flattering. And so the idea of the podcast was to try to dig up what is the story behind the Hollywood blockbuster of the Africans there, and also what is it saying about the continent. I mean, not every single episode is going to be on that route, but many of the stories we're looking at are of the films which have white or any other race characters as the foreground, and then the servants in the background, the people carrying things in the background. What's their story? That's how we had the idea. And I got that just by watching an old Tarzan episode. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's probably my grandfather was someone like that, or could have been. But what was his story?
Right. Okay. So you look at Tarzan and you think to yourself, as a small girl, I presume, when you first watched Tarzan, like most of us, what was the thing that struck you most about watching? It would have been one of those early versions, because of course it's been redone a gazillion times, hasn't it?
I'm very fascinated to why it's been remade so many times. The first time I watched Tarzan was, I think I was 8 years old, and we just moved from Uganda to the UK. It was the civil war at the time, and we moved for safety to the UK. But I just noticed that all the Black people in Tarzan were portrayed as very cowardly. And I thought, why are they terrified of animals and stuff when they've been surviving all this for centuries? And yet, Tarzan, this person who's not even brought up by humans, who's brought up by apes, can somehow sort everything out, whether it's falling into a river, he's the one who saves everybody, so on and so forth. And I just found it fascinating. And that's how I got hooked to finding out the backstory of all those cowardly Africans.
And also, he didn't really have, if I remember, he didn't really have any social interaction any substantial basis with Africans. They're just bit part players in the background. Am I right?
Has absolutely no African friends. And in fact, I think he murders one in the first episode. I mean, in the first ever Tarzan, the 1932 Tarzan, the Ape Man. He does a one-handed drowning of an African person, a straggling person in an expedition party, because one of his family members, who is the ape family, has been killed. The whole point of the podcast, or just how we try to retell the story, is who were these people? One, they were not cowardly at all. They were surviving a lot. I mean, on a personal note, my own great-grandfather was actually killed by a hyena because he was trying to defend his cattle at night, and it was a hyena attack. He was bitten in the leg and died soon after that. And that's just a story that stayed in the family for a long time. but we never saw him as a coward. He was a hero. He was trying to defend the family. But that's not how people who were falling off boats in Tarzan, or being thrown to other wild animals, or carrying things, and as part of an expedition party carrying supplies, are portrayed. They're portrayed as somehow hapless, cowardly, and that's how the story. We just try to retell it from the other side.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Barbara. I think Donu, did you want to jump in on this? I saw you.
Well, first of all, that was nearly 100, that was like 100 years ago. Have things improved since then? That's one question I'd like to ask. I also wonder if you've heard this joke. It's in rather bad taste, but it made me laugh. You know, this habit of casting Black people and Asian people in roles that would traditionally have been given to whites in programs like Bridgerton, and there's talk of, for example, making James Bond, the next James Bond, a Black man like Idris Elba. Somebody said the one thing that they wouldn't dare recast and subject to colorblind casting is Tarzan, because Hollywood studios would not have the courage to cast a Black man swinging from branch to branch like a monkey. So I thought that was really funny because, yeah, what do you think about that? Is it funny?
I think really that's absolutely true. I don't think they would, but I've always thought. I mean, I've never, shamefully, I've never actually read the books, Tarzan.
No, because they're rubbish. That's why they're widely widely known to be rubbish.
I've never actually read any Tarzan ever, but the way I see it, I think Tarzan, for the people who were making it, was a way of trying to talk about Black people without saying that. It's saying to look, they're savage, they don't really wear clothes. There was something on one of the original adverts, it said, Tarzan only knows the law of the jungle, or something like that. And I think it's a way, it was a foil to just talk about African people without actually without appearing racist, because the main character is actually white and, in fact, aristocratic, a European aristocrat who somehow finds his way to Africa, and also is at the top of the social chain there. And despite being brought up by apes and everything. But as for the second question you asked about recasting certain films, my personal opinion, I think that you need to find more films about actual Africans. It shouldn't always be we must recast Ariel as a Black person, or we must recast. I studied history, and it just gets a bit jarring. I mean, I did like Bridgerton. It was the first series, but it was just jarring, and it's rewriting history. And I think we should just. My personal opinion is that we could find our own stories, even in the diaspora, and tell those stories.
I totally agree. In fact, it reeks of what I call wannabe. It makes Black people look as if their dream is to play white roles, instead of finding interesting stories of our own, of which there are many.
But Barbara, Spike Lee is one of my favorite directors, and he's been making films for now, 35 years. And just, I mean, a lot of his films, She's Gotta Have It, Mo Better Blues, Do the Right Thing. They're great films to watch. The storyline is fantastic. The characters are brilliant. The music is often, incredible. But they do have a point to them. And I'm wondering how many other filmmakers are making movies that are commercially successful like Spike Lee's, but also have a point to them.
That's a good question. I think that the film industry has changed a lot. It's no longer driven by the massive studios anymore, like all the streaming networks like Netflix, Apple, Hulu, all of these have upset the traditional Hollywood. And I do think there are some interesting films and series being made. But you have to, I think there's also almost too much. I've seen lots of, for example, on Apple TV, there's loads and loads of interesting sci-fi, which I think has actually been brilliant for African or Black actors, because it's set so far in the future. You don't know what the future's going to be like, so you can do anything with a character. I mean, of course, you can refer back, but you can do anything with a character, and it's just given them a way to cast different minorities generally, not just African people. But also, I think the way that African people are portrayed in like the most recent blockbusters, things like there is one really funny one, Beast, with Idris Elba. I mean, that was quite, I think that, I'm not sure if that was a hit or not, but I just watched it for the show anyway, for Hollywood Africans. That's going to be in our next series. But they do refer back to what many films about Africa were about, which is it's always on safari, and then something goes wrong because there's a beast. And then, of course, there's Black Panther. That was supposed to be, I mean, I suppose that falls into the whole sci-fi category where you thinking into the future and what it could be like. And then it's a blank canvas, so you can portray African people in loads of different ways. And The Woman King, that one was also rewriting history a bit, but that was a big blockbuster. I think Hollywood will always do what has to do to get people to stay in the cinema. And at the moment, I think movements like Me Too influence the writing, and so they will have women portrayed in a certain way, or they may not be 100% accurate.
But I was just thinking, you mentioned Spike Lee, Patrick, but also the Jordan Peels and the Tyler Perrys. There are more and more well-established Black directors. And so isn't it incumbent upon Black filmmakers to actually influence the whole Hollywood scene just by their presence, just by producing and shaping the narrative in a way, because that's what we can do. We're tired of constantly being presented as kind of servile add-ons, extras who are either mammies or butlers.
Well, that's why I was so surprised by Bridgerton, because it's actually produced by a Black woman, the brilliant Shonda Rhimes. And I would have thought that, being as creative as she is, she wouldn't go down that path of aping white people through Black actors, and just find something completely original that was about Black people, real Black people.
Maybe costume dramas make money, and that's what she thought.
Well, you can have a costume drama with Black people. I mean, for example, the Black people in the Caribbean in the 17th and 18th centuries, um, you don't have to cast a Black person as the Duke of Hastings in England to make it interesting, you know? Anyway, that's just my view. I expected more of Shonda, and I'm a great fan of hers.
But then so many people watched it, so it's definitely feeding a need. So we have to ask ourselves, what is that need? What is that? One of these? I don't know. And there's probably more down the line. I don't see Bridgerton being axed anytime soon.
It's the wannabe need. It's the wannabe need.
Do you feel that there is a bigger push towards Black people taking control of their own film industries?
I think there's a willingness to, but it's the organisation. Like I know at the moment, there's Idris Elba is behind. They've bought the rights, and I think are trying to make things fall apart. And I think, I'm not sure if it's going to be, I mean, definitely because as things fall apart, it's going to be an entirely black cast, and it's also a very well-known book, and this, I think it's already been made before. So I think and I think that just because it has Idris Elba as the lead is going to be huge.
I think that's fine, Barbara. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that ends this edition of Africa Here and Now. Please subscribe and share our YouTube channel. We're in a battle with the algorithm. You can really help. You can get all our episodes on the website, www.africahereandnow.com. We're available on all the major audio platforms, as well as on your smart speaker. And don't forget the socials. We're on Facebook, Insta and X. I'm at Martine Dennis. Get in touch. We recorded this on Friday, the 18th of October, 2024. Our producer is Anne Busby. Our original music is by Enric Adam, Moses Abuye, and Charlie Panton put it all together. To our guests, thank you, Professor Eid Ali Ahmed and Barbara Angopa. From Patrick, Donu and me, thank you for your company.